Some of the top news stories of the last century are stories of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is hardly old news. It continues to compromise the mental and physical health of its victims. It continues to destroy families. It affects productivity. Sexual harassment is illegal, it's expensive, and it's wrong. In the next few minutes, what you'll see and hear are scenarios based on actual testimony from people who were scarred by sexual harassment. Fathers, sons, mothers, daughters, your neighbors, your friends. The names and details of the situations have been changed, but the stories are true and all too familiar.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
He's a teacher. Who's gonna believe me?
Just kids, just boys being boys.
I just like to make my favorite teachers happy. I like to make them feel good. See, that makes me feel good.
One of these days, she's going to do this to the wrong person.
And when I say you are grounded, Anita. What were you thinking? Were you thinking? Leaving school after I drop you off? And the principal says you have been absent for 3 days this week? What is going on inside your head?
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
Anita, I want you to be honest with me. Are you on drugs? Just look at me and tell me, are you taking drugs?
No.
You've always been such a good student. Help me to understand me, huh? What is going on inside of your head?
Sexual harassment is a form of discrimination on the basis of sex that is prohibited both in the workplace and in the schools. The EEOC has defined sexual harassment as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature that occur when 1. Submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term or condition of an individual's employment. 2. Submission to or rejection of such conduct by an individual is used as the basis for decisions affecting an individual's employment. Or 3. Such conduct has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with an individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. Courts have traditionally recognized 2 forms of sexual harassment: hostile environment and quid pro quo. A hostile environment is created when one person subjects another to unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature that are unsolicited and offensive to the victim. This harassment is so severe or pervasive enough that it compromises the victim's employment or educational opportunities. In these cases, the totality of the circumstances will be considered: the frequency of the conduct, severity, whether it was physically threatening or humiliating, or merely offensive.
He's a teacher. Who's going to believe me? I've worked almost 10 years as a cafeteria manager. I'm a professional. I'm here to do a job. I like what I do. I work hard. I like the people, most of the people that I work with. I like the hours. I like being with the kids. I like being in charge. What I don't like is dirty jokes, dirty remarks, and dirty materials being shoved in my face. I just don't know how much longer I can last here. I just don't know. Everything's dirty to him. You say, look, it's raining. He makes something dirty out of that. You hand him a spoon. He makes something dirty out of that. Excuse me, Mr. Waters. We're working here.
Take a look at this, Lakeisha. My brother sent it to me.
No, thank you.
What's the matter? Are you a prude? You're such a prude.
Mr. Waters, we're very busy here, and I don't think this is...
Mr. Waters, would you lighten up? Please, call me by my real name, Pimp Daddy. You prude. How did you ever end up with kids? Word. What does your husband do to throw you out at night?
Mr. Waters, this is not the...
Lighten up. It's only a joke.
just trying to get my work done.
You want me to go away and leave you alone? You have to take a look at this. What's the matter? Don't you know how to read? Come here, I'll read it for you.
Finally, I said, stop following me. And what did he do? He moved in closer. I told him not to touch me, and he grabbed me around my waist and made out like he was going to kiss me on the cheek. I'm telling you, he will not stop. But one of these days, he's going to do this to the wrong person.
One of these days, he's going to do this to the wrong person. Chemistry was a nightmare. My mom and dad tried to help me, but they couldn't get it either. I studied and I asked questions. I asked a lot of questions in class. Oh, and then Mr. Smith, he told me one day that he'd tutor me. And it was really cool. The first time, it's just normal stuff. It was really cool at first. Somehow he managed to get into my locker. He'd leave little notes for me. On Valentine's Day, he left candy and a card. But who can I tell? He was a teacher. Such a nice guy. Everybody liked him.
Quid pro quo literally means something for something. Quid pro quo, sexual harassment, occurs when a person in a position of authority demands sexual favors from a subordinate in exchange for concrete benefits. But note that threats alone can create a hostile environment, even if quid pro quo threats are not followed through.
One of these days, she's going to do this to the wrong person. I know at least 3 different teachers who've been transferred from this school for all the wrong reasons.
Well, look, it did get here after all.
Yes, it came.
Well, I had to wonder. I hadn't heard a thing from you about whether or not it came.
It came during my second period class.
Uh-oh. So did it cause a stir?
It interrupted their midterm exam.
Oops. Oh, Robert, what's the matter?
Dr. Laurie,
I was thinking today, Robert, about this classroom and how it's really not very comfortable for you. It's so small. The view is awful. It faces the west. All that hot afternoon sun.
I'm very happy right here.
Oh, I can imagine you are. You see, I've observed you, Robert. And you seem to be a man who enjoys simple pleasures, and I think that is just terrific. It's just that you'd be much happier in a nicer classroom.
I'm doing quite well right here, thanks.
Well, think about it, Robert. You think it's very hard. Now, which would you prefer? A nice, cozy classroom upstairs? A quiet corner room where you can look out on the city? Or a drab old classroom somewhere else?
What? Exactly what do you mean by somewhere else? What are you saying? Are you threatening to transfer me?
Robert, I just like to make my favorite teachers happy. I like to make them feel good, and that makes me feel good. And I like to feel good, Robert. Listen, what'd you think about it? Oh, I sure would hate to lose you, Robert. Would you please just promise to think about it? That's my good boy.
I started locking my classroom, even when I was in it. Her implications would have been clear to any reasonable person. So my wife said I should report it, and I did. Human Resources said, gee, that's awful. and then they proceeded to do absolutely nothing. Before I submitted the report, all of my evaluations were excellent. Then suddenly, I'm performing below average. I submitted all of my grades on time, but somehow they always seem to get lost. I really became depressed. I developed insomnia, an ulcer, and finally we just said enough is enough. So we hired an attorney and we... Look, I'm a teacher, and it absolutely kills me that this settlement is taking money away from my school district. But it was the only way anyone would listen. And every day I wonder, why did it have to come to this?
Sexual harassment is illegal. A person who engages in sexual harassment or abusive conduct may violate one or more provisions of the Texas Penal Code and could be arrested and imprisoned. Code provisions include indecency with a child, sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault, injury to a child, and official oppression. Any of these could land you in prison. Even if there's no jail time involved, for school districts and for individuals, sexual harassment can get very expensive. Individuals can lose state certifications, and supervisors can be held personally liable for the conduct of a subordinate.
How many more girls were going to have to be molested before you did something about this?
Mrs. Gonzalez, I can assure you, the boys have been punished.
They're suspended for 2 days. For the past 4 months, my daughter has been molested. Every day. She and her friends have been grabbed and groped and harassed every day. Right in front of your faces. So, what happens when these boys come back to school?
I assure you, they have been dealt with.
And really, Miss Gonzalez, they're just kids. They're just boys being boys.
We see this kind of thing all the time. Girls just mature faster than boys. You remember what it was like when you were a kid.
Anita will not be returning to this school. And I am going to sue you personally. And I'm going to sue you and any other teacher that stood by out there and let this happen. You might want to turn on your televisions because you're going to be on the news tonight.
If you are in doubt as to whether your own behavior around a student or coworker could be considered sexual harassment, here's a quick way to test. Ask yourself, would I want my mother or spouse to hear what I'm saying? Would I want my child to see what I'm doing? Would I want my behavior to be shown on the 6 o'clock news?
You can prevent sexual harassment and even minimize your liability when sexual harassment occurs. Educate your employees, co-workers, and students. Create a sexual harassment policy with confidentiality at its core. Read and become familiar with the district's policy on harassment. Establish procedures for reporting harassment and then investigate all reported incidents. Remember, by law, you are required to immediately report suspected child abuse to the authorities, Child Protective Services, or law enforcement. Failure to report suspected child abuse is punishable by jail time and/or a fine. Above all, take action. Do something. Do anything to stop sexual harassment before it stops you.